Good evening, this is Brown at Eye of Brown, and I hope everyone had a good 4th of July. And so tonight we are going to be talking about the Terminus Factor, Chapter 1 of 5. So this particular chapter takes place in annual number 9 of Captain America. And for those of you who don't know, an annual issue within a comic book series was generally a book that contained more than one story. Like it might have a front and center story that has either the exact same amount of pages that a regular issue of a comic book series would have, or they might have a few extra pages. But more often than not, there were also a couple of extra stories that would accompany the front and center story. And a good amount of the time, these extra stories were standalone stories. And, sometimes, they were sort of proving grounds for, maybe a writer or an artist to, take a shot with, handling, a comic book character. And so annuals, for me at least, are oftentimes, quite fun to look through, because even if there's just one story, it's oftentimes one really big story that, is maybe the equivalent of, two, regular issues of a comic book series, or it's a source of multiple stories that, are oftentimes fun to read. Or at the very least, they offer, a snapshot of a comic book series within a certain decade. And so the Terminus Factor was a 5-part annual crossover with multiple titles that was done in 1990. And the first part was done in Captain America Annual 9. And I remember that I saw an advertisement for this particular storyline in, I think it was like a Marvel preview book. We're talking like from way back in like 89 or 90, like 1989 or 90. And I remember I saw the artwork for this cover within that advertisement book. And so, and for the record, I didn't actually see that, 1990 book, in 1990. This was like several years after the fact, but still, it was like, things to come in 1990. But anyway, though, I remember the cover art that was, displayed, from this issue, and I distinctly remember it being a lot more bloody, in regards to, say, Iron Man's, blasting of Captain America, and like you saw a lot more wounds on him, and blood actually coming from him. And so I guess when they actually came out with the proper cover, they kind of had to tone down the violence, so. But anyway, though, I just thought that was kind of cool. But anyway, so the main story, it's called You Are What You Eat, and it was written by Roy and Dann Thomas, two very good writers who have done work on a multitude of titles for both Marvel and DC, and you can almost always count on them for a decent to good story, and sometimes even great story, especially with Roy Thomas. And the artwork was by the team of Jim Valentino and Sam De La Rosa. And Jim Valentino, might be, worthy of noting in a sense that he was the creator of the Image comic books character Shadowhawk, or as some people have jokingly referred to that character as Wolverine 2099, because it essentially looked like a futuristic version of Wolverine, with the armor and stuff and claws. But he also worked on Guardians of the Galaxy, the 1990s series. He did the first 20 or 30 issues, I think, as far as writing and art goes. But anyway, though, so yeah, Jim Valentino, though, uh, it was fast. It's always fascinating to see his work from a time like within stories like this, because I mean, seeing how he started off at Marvel and then went on to Image Comics, and it's always fascinating to see one of the former Image artists, before they became Image artists, doing some work here. So anyway, though, the story, You Are What You Eat, aka the Terminus Factor, chapter 1, it takes place in Washington State, and it starts off with Captain America helping a scientist by the name of Dr. Ramona Napier, and basically they're in this pod, or it's almost like a ship, but it's meant to go down to volcanic areas, and basically through the lava, and conduct scientific probes, and so this was something that was being partially bankrolled by Tony Stark, who most people know is Iron Man. But within the comic book universe at this point in time, not everyone in the world knew that Tony Stark was Iron Man at this point. As far as they knew, Tony Stark, and Iron Man were two different people. But anyway, Tony Stark was, partially funding this experiment, and at his insistence, Captain America accompanied Dr. Napier on this mission, within this, probe. And so basically, there's a lot of experimental technology at work here. I mean, there's like a sort of shielding to keep the probe from being, destroyed by the lava and the heats. And it also keeps the heat from killing those on the inside. And so they're conducting the experiment and, getting information. But then at that point, within the exact same volcano that they're in, it turns out there's another object down there. I mean, we're talking like, miles down, and it's a pod of some sort, and it looks to be alien in design. And right at the point that Captain America and Dr. Napier are conducting their experiments, this pod of unknown origin breaks apart, and this swarm of it's almost like sentient energy. There's like a swarm of sentient energy or something, and that it comes out, and it interferes with the mechanics of the mechanical devices of the probe that Captain America and Dr. Napier are in, and it basically nearly causes their deaths. And this swarm, after having done that, it makes its way out of the volcano, and it's seen by the scientific team that Tony Stark is with, and they see it goes into the woods somewhere. And at first, I mean, they don't know what to make of it. They're thinking that it must have been something have something to do with the experiments that Dr. Napier was running. But at this point, though, Tony Stark covertly switches over to Iron Man, to help out Captain America and Dr. Napier, and basically he gets them out of the pod in time, and Dr. Napier, she's able to recover, and she's not badly hurt or anything like that, but she came pretty close. But in the meantime, though, that swarm of energy seemed to settle in a part of the woods, and basically it made its way into the water, and it seemed to possess a swarm of a school of fish, and this particular school of fish is being caught. It's being caught by local tribesmen, for a festival in the area, and basically the fish are being used as a primary food source for this festival, and unfortunately, because they're possessed by this sentient swarm of unknown origin, it has an adverse effect on those who eat the fish, because this fish, it's being prepared, and the majority of the people at this festival end up consuming the fish. And because Tony Stark was a friend of the organizers of the festival, Iron Man and Captain America were able to make an appearance there, as was Dr. Napier, because, the festival and the scientific experiment were kind of all in the same area. But Napier and Captain America are, two of the few people who don't consume the fish, simply because of, the physical trauma of, their near-death experience with the, probe nearly, sinking in the lava. And so neither one of them, has a particularly active appetite at the moment. But unfortunately, everyone else around them does, including Iron Man, who, as I said, I think I might have mentioned it earlier, but at this point in time, not everyone in the world knows that he's Tony Stark. So, he's, sitting off by himself with this helmet, half raised, but he's making sure no one can see, his full face underneath, that, no one can, tell him that it's Tony Stark. But anyway, he's one of the people that consumes the fish, and along with everyone else, is suddenly driven murderously insane, to a point where it's like the zombies from Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. It's like, suddenly everyone's a raving lunatic, and they're out for blood. And so and unfortunately, Tony Stark as Iron Man is one of the victims of this, because he consumed the fish that was affected by this bizarre, this strange life form. And so anyway, Captain America and Iron Man, you mix it up, and Captain America, even though he's superhuman, because of the super soldier serum, it's him versus Iron Man, who basically has enough firepower to level a city. And it's a rather brutal fight, all things considered. In fact, I was actually kind of surprised at how brutal it was, for a comic book from this time. Because the cover art here, it promises intense fight, and sometimes cover art lies, but in this case, it delivered. So the fight that's promised on the cover actually does happen within the story, though. And basically, Captain America gets some good shots in, but Iron Man's just cleaning his clock. And even though, you gotta bear in mind that he's not in control, it's wherever this swarm of energy is, that's turning the town's populace into like this mob of almost like maddened zombies. Tony Stark's being affected the same way. And so while Captain America is getting his clock cleaned, he's also he also makes the realization that once these people are exposed to extreme forms of cold, they seem to snap out of it and become themselves again. And so Captain America is having to sort of strategically, keep Iron Man focused on him, as opposed to, say, going after, the innocent civilians, whether they're possessed or no. And, he knows that, there's a very good chance that, Iron Man or Tony Stark, while being possessed, could easily, kill him, with no hesitation. But partially because, whoever it is that's controlling Iron Man isn't Tony Stark, they're not too familiar with how to move around, how to operate the systems, but they're just intelligent enough to get things going to where, while Captain America is injured pretty badly, he's able to avoid outright being killed. But he is able to manipulate, Iron Man into, chasing after him to a part of the mountains that's, covered in snow. And also, the people who are, possessed, once they see this happening, they're going up the mountains themselves. And because it seems like whoever's possessed, they seem to be going for, sources of, I guess you could say, electricity, energy, and so, you got Tony Stark, who's got the Iron Man armor, and, he's going, after, the technology, that's that on hand, with, not only himself, but, with the probe. And so, and the people, they're going after Iron Man, ironically. But anyway, what ends up happening is, the cold basically, snaps him out of it, and just in time, because Captain America is, nearly falling to his death, and, Tony Stark snaps out of it just in time to save him. And so, at this point, they're wanting to think that it's just an isolated, random incident, but as Dr. Napier was pointing out, the people who turned into these maniacs had all eaten the fish. And considering how many fish there are and how big the area is, the bodies of water are, there's no telling how far the rest of the fish have gone and who else has gotten to them. And so, and that's the point where the story says this is not the end, more or less. And you see, of all things, it looks like a grizzly bear, or at least a bear of that nature, having been possessed, and basically with this horrific glow to its eyes. And so this was a pretty good story. At least as far as first chapters go, and it was well written. It was well illustrated. Roy and Dann Thomas, they had a good ear for dialogue, and they were able to show that Captain America how he has a good way with interacting with everyday people, as well as with his one of his fellow Avengers. And you got Tony Stark, who he's playing two people. He's playing himself, but he's also playing Iron Man, and he's pretty good at it too. And they show that he's gotten used to being two different people. But I also liked how the artwork. This was actually some pretty good early art from Jim Valentino, as well as De La Rosa, and they make a good penciling and inking team. And whenever the action's happening, there's a very frenetic pace to it. And whether it be Captain America leaping through obstacles, or getting someone out of the line of fire, or whether it be him and Iron Man throwing down, the fight choreography is very well done. Like the way the bodies are drawn, the movement and what have you. But also whenever there's actually physical harm being done to either one of them, it looks pretty brutal. Whether it be Captain America pitching his shield at a possessed Iron Man and actually hitting him enough to where one of his eyes, one of his eye guards is shattered, and you see like this blank possessed eye staring out at him. That was actually a pretty cool image right there. But then of course you got Captain America being beaten down like nobody's business, by Iron Man, and his costume's torn. I mean, he's bloody. It was pretty brutal, all things considered. And I also appreciated how this story that was done in 1990, actually foreshadowed the eventual battle between Cap and Iron Man, in Civil War, both the comic book story as well as the Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. I mean, so someone, whoever made those stories, must have looked through here at some point as one of their sources for inspiration, because there's a lot of foreshadowing, especially in terms of like how badly Cap gets beat up, and how basically Iron Man is a source of danger. Even though he's being possessed, you see Iron Man cast in an antagonistic role in this particular story, and depending on your perspective, he's also an antagonist in the Civil War storyline. So I thought that was pretty neat. I mean, I highly doubt they intended to foreshadow it, back in 1990, but here we go. We got foreshadowing here. So, the Terminus Factor, Chapter 1, aka You Are What You Eat, I'm going to go ahead and give 4 out of 5 stars to. It was a good story. It was a good introductory chapter to, a multi-part storyline. And also, I liked how there was just a little element of horror, in the sense that, the source of contamination is soon to be widespread, it sounds like, in the sense that the fish are a source of a considerable source of food for both humans and animals, and who knows who or what is going to be getting the fish next. And if you've read any sort of like I don't know, like H.P. Lovecraft stories like The Color Out of Space, the idea of something from beyond contaminating the nature around us, namely the food sources, that's a pretty scary thought. So, I mean, this wasn't like an outright horror story, but that little bit there, I guess maybe it's, getting older, I guess, you kind of appreciate stuff like that in terms of, how spooky it would be. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, though, so that was for the first that was the first story in here, in the first chapter, in the Terminus Factor. And so the second story is called A Soldier Story, and it was written by Randall Frenz, and it's Frenz, and I think that's how you say his name. I'm not sure if I've read anything by him, but he does a pretty good job here. The artwork is by Mark Bagley and Mike DiCarlo, and once again, you have another good pencil and ink team, and Mark Bagley, for the record, is got to be one of the best Spider-Man artists from the 90s, and I mean, he did he did the Spider-Man that most people I guess you could say would consider the main reality of Marvel comics, the Spider-Man that we've known all these years, but he also worked on Ultimate Spider-Man in the Ultimate Marvel line, and if I remember correctly, he did most of, if not all, the issues of that series. And so it's always really cool to see his artwork in another series, in a series other than something Spider-Man related, but it's always fun to see his artwork. And Mike DiCarlo, I know I've seen his work as far as inking goes, and he always does a good job. And most of the time, there's like a almost seamless blend, between the pencil and inks whenever DiCarlo was involved. So you got a good team here, and the story on this one, standalone story, and basically an old friend of Captain America's from World War II, has become a politician and ends up getting, near mortally wounded in an assassination attempt. And so, the story, it goes from his perspective of, him flashing between, being operated on, and then, in the present, and, the doctor's fighting to save his life. And then it cuts to, him flashing back to his younger days in World War II when he served with the, Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos. And there was a particular mission that he was on, involved with, in which Captain America and Bucky teamed up with the Howling Commandos to stop one of the Red Skull's schemes. And I thought this was actually a pretty cool story, because you're getting a perspective of a character who, as far as I know, was never, I guess, a major character within Nick Fury's, I guess, network, but to basically see someone from Nick Fury's quote unquote younger days, like from World War II, that was a pretty cool perspective. And this particular character, this the guy who the story's being told from, his perspective, he you see how basically he initially goes in thinking that hey, he's the best and the brightest, he can handle anything, but then when he's confronted with the chaos of war, he freezes up on multiple occasions, and Fury and just about everyone else is wanting to chunk him out of the unit. But Captain America, being Captain America, stands up for the guy, and basically motivates him to do better. And he says, hey, this is war, we all freeze up sometimes, but what do you do from here? And so basically you don't let that define you. You learn from it, and it's just like anything else in life, except this is war. But so because Captain America had the guy's back, the guy had the confidence to and the courage to carry out his part of the mission. And so and at that point it's cutting to whenever he's remembering like a physical trauma from the past, it's sort of coinciding with the physical trauma of the present, when the doctors are trying to get the bullets out of him. And so it was a neat a little story. It was a good standalone story. I guess if I had to nitpick, I would say that it did seem a little cliche that this guy was a politician, or let me phrase that, the guy became a politician, and because it seemed like when the politics were involved, you knew the guy was a politician, but you didn't really know what side of the political spectrum he was on. He was just spouting a bunch of stuff that sounded vague and cliche. And Captain America was talking about how if anyone can help maintain the safety of this country, it's this guy. But at the same time, when you're listening to him talk, it just doesn't really, or let me phrase that, when you're reading what he's saying, it just doesn't really sound like anything exceptionally brilliant. It just sounds like something you would see your usual politician talking about, like maybe a fireside chat or something. But it's not focused on a lot. The main focus is the guy having the flashback while he's dying or being operated on. But I think that there probably would have been a little more power to the story if this guy had just maybe been retired or something to that effect, or maybe not retired, but just he had a career other than a politician, but maybe he got caught in the crossfire of something, and by happenstance Captain America happened to be there. And I mean, that would have been I guess a more interesting take on things, because it would have been like, hey, Captain America's there for his friends regardless of whether they're bigwig politicians or they're just ordinary Joes, and so but anyway, though, Captain America, though, regardless, does come across as a good guy in this story, and basically he's the friend that doesn't let you down, and he's always got your back in times of war, and they really did a good job of conveying that. And the artwork, was really fun to look at, especially when it came to the action scenes. And you could tell. I mean, while it was chaotic, like say whenever the commandos were fighting with the Nazis, there's an organization, to how it's all laid out and how it's drawn, and so it was fun to look at, and it was fun to read. And so I'm going to go ahead and give a soldier story, 4 out of 5 stars. It was a good story, and and I liked how it offered a unique perspective. Not only just from like an outsider's perspective on, say, not only Captain America, but just World War, fighting in war in general. So soldier story, good stuff. So the third and last story in this issue is called Walking the Line. And it was written by Fabian Nicieza, who's done a lot of X-Men work over the years. And the artwork was by Don Hudson and Tom Morgan. And I've seen a lot of stuff that they've done, and respectively, both pencils and inks, and they're pretty good at what they do. And their artwork in this particular story is well done. And in this particular story, it stars Jack Monroe, who was, I believe, I want to say he was like the second person to go by the name of Bucky. And after James Buchanan Barnes, after he was supposedly killed in during World War II, there was another attempt to create Captain America and Bucky, because both Captain America and Bucky were presumed lost in combat, in battle at the time. But Bucky, though, Jack Monroe, he was, if I remember correctly, exposed to a version of the super soldier serum that it enhanced him like Captain America in terms of strength and agility, but it also had the side effect of driving him partially insane at times. And so basically he was having to combat that over the years, and he eventually took on the name of Nomad. And basically if I don't remember if he was a member of the Avengers at all, but I do know that he worked with them on occasions, and he tended to be kind of a lone wolf. Like, he tended to follow his own path and be a vigilante. So this particular story, though, it was interesting, because he's attending the funeral of a street informant that he knew, and her whole family's there, and Jack Monroe is basically staying off to the side because he's wanting to pay his respects, but not while her whole family's there. But he sees someone there, and this guy is a criminal, and he's also the deceased's former pimp. And so when he sees that this creep is at this girl's funeral, as well as the fact that he's interacting with the girl's family in a rather friendly way, he's Nomad, he's wanting to figure out, okay, what's going on here, and what's the story? Why is he being so friendly with her parents, and why are they being friendly to him? I mean, surely they know that he had something to do with their daughter's death. But anyway, though, so he takes it upon himself to work on this, to come up with his own case, to solve regarding this. And what you get here is basically a story in which there are multiple sides to deal with. And Jack Monroe, he's never been one for subtle detective work. He's always been a smash and grab type guy. But I mean, he's trying to do the right thing in a sense of, he's one to see that justice is served on behalf of the his former informant, and so, but at the same time he starts to realize that this is a situation that he's bitten off more than they can chew, and there's like a vendetta going on between this drug dealer / pimp and the girl's family, and but it's one of those situations where things aren't clear cut and dry, and it's something that convinces him to basically try and attack situations from a different angle. And it also this story in particular serves as kind of a prelude to a Nomad miniseries that came out, I think it was in the same year of 1990. Also written by Fabian Nicieza. I never read it, but I do know that it came out at the time, and it was regarding the character of Jack Monroe. For those who liked his character, it was something that tended to be on their radar. But anyway, though, this wasn't. I didn't think the story was it was interesting, but at the same time, I think partially because I was only vaguely familiar with the character of Jack Monroe, I wasn't quite as invested in what was going on. And also, when you go from, I guess the, character of Captain America, who's, very skilled in leadership, and then you go from, his character to, the character of Jack Monroe, who is very much, shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy. You kind of see, there's kind of at least for me, at least, there was a little bit of a disappointment in regards to, how, I guess you could say, Jack Monroe, is not Captain America, obviously, but at the same time, I was kind of thinking that, he would have played things a little more smartly. And maybe that was, the point that Fabian Nicieza and the crew were trying to make with this particular story, in the sense that, the way he was approaching things, wasn't, it was getting results, but not the ones, he was looking for. And so it was how, but I guess the main point of the story is it was a lead in to the Nomad miniseries. But because I was only vaguely familiar with his character, and plus the fact that I never read the Nomads miniseries that came after this particular story, I guess some of the emotional impact was lost on me. And I will admit that the twist that came into play regarding the girl's father and her pimp, the conflict between the two. I will admit that particular twist, was a little unexpected, I guess. But at the same time, though, I guess the way the rest of it was written, I wasn't quite as invested in it as I was, say, with the character of Captain America. Just mainly because I'm more familiar with his character than I am with Jack Monroe's character. But I mean, it was a decent story, but it just seemed to be a lead into, another, mini series, as opposed to, say, a one and done standalone story, which I think would have been better if they had done it as that, as opposed to, say, a lead into something else. And I think that's why, say, a soldier story, worked better, and was actually a good story because it was a standalone story and it did its job well. Whereas Walking the Line, I mean, it wasn't a bad story, but it wasn't a standalone story necessarily. And, that's where I think it was kind of, I think that's kind of where, it went from being good to just being decent, because there wasn't really much incentive on my part to go out and check out, the miniseries that came after it. But I mean, it's not a bad story. The writing's reasonably well done, but and the artwork is as well, especially when it comes to say Jack Monroe interrogating someone, or getting face to face with certain people who end up telling him what's really going on, with the rivalry between the father and the pimp. But anyway, though, I'm going to go ahead and give that story. I'm going to give Walking the Line 3 out of 5 stars. It was decent. So you've got 3 stories, 2 of which are 4 stars out of 5, and the final story 3 stars out of 5. But overall, this was a good issue, and I definitely want to see what happens next with the Terminus Factor, and that's going to be in an annual issue of Iron Man, which I'll be reviewing next, most likely. But I also liked the individual stories that were alongside the main story in this issue. I liked them well enough as well. So yeah, that's my review on the Terminus Factor, chapter 1, and I hope y'all enjoyed it, my take on it. And y'all got questions, comments, let me know. Y'all have a good night. Happy 4th of July. Bye.